friend, and welcome back to the show. First of all, I'm sorry for having taken some time. It was necessary for me. I have been working on some projects. But I'm back for this episode today, and it's pretty much exciting because it's kind of a new, let's say, format. Instead of giving some kind of lectures on the UX process by itself, I want to also give a bit of a feedback from my experience, what have been wrong, what have been going wrong in the past in my experience, and how can this help others improve. So in this episode, we'll talk about how can you make your UX research insights actionable, and actually we'll see 5 tips on how to make them more actionable. Expect to learn what is an actionable insight, why do we want that, why do we strive as UX researchers to be more actionable, what does it mean, why do we want that, when do we realize that we should improve in the end, because producing actionable insights, it's kind of, let's say, of course, it's a skill, but it comes with experience, and so in the end, it becomes almost an art, let's say. So it comes with practice, and you may not be able, it may happen that you do not produce actionable insights at the starting of your experience. It can happen. Also, I will want to reassure our audience to say that not everything entirely depends on you. So if you're seeing right now that your insights are not actionable, not everything can be, let's say, on your shoulders. So yeah, what is an actionable insight? Why do we want that? When do we realize we should improve? And then we will go over the 5 tips to provide actionable insights for your stakeholders, for the company, or even for yourself if you're working on a case study and then you're partnering with developers, designers, and so on. How can your insights, let's say, be acted upon? So without further ado, let's start. What is an actionable insight? Well, an actionable insight is simply an insight that we can act upon. So if you listen to my previous episodes, in one episode I talk about how to frame insights. And so in this episode I also mention what is an insight actually. But if you haven't listened to it, I highly encourage you to do so. But don't worry, I will go over again some aspects to sum up. An insight in UX research, in user experience research, is something that we learn about the user, something that we didn't know. That's why it's an insight. It's something, more generally speaking, that challenges our understanding of our users, something that is teaching us about their behavior, about their mental models, about their preferences, feelings, expectation, needs, and so on. Anything that will teach us about our users and something that we didn't know beforehand. That's an insight, that's a learning. To be really differentiated with a finding. A finding is merely summarizing your data, synthesizing your data, but there is no meaning added to it. It's not put into perspective. And then there is the raw data, which is the data you actually gather. So it can be like, I don't know, a recording. It can be quant data, analytics, and so on. So you have various levels, and the insight, let's say, is the more actionable, the most actionable one, because this is actually something that challenges the way we see our users, and this is only with an insight that we can improve our apps, actually. And even if you think you're improving an app or a service or anything, a product, based on a finding or raw data, it's because somehow you internalized the insights yourself, even if you didn't write it. You internalized it and you added meaning implicitly, and then you act upon it. So maybe that's implicitly what you're doing with your team, but actually you cannot ideate, you cannot innovate without actually an insight. That would be really, really difficult. So that is also the second point that I wanted to talk about. Why do we want actionable insights? as user researchers, our value that we provide to the company and to the stakeholders is actually running user research. So research per se, not only talking to users, but the whole process of gathering user data, setting up the let's say the user study, planning it, running it, gathering data, analyzing, so that it makes sense, so that it reduces the uncertainty that product managers and other stakeholders have when developing a product before putting the iteration or the product on the market. Because actually that is why user research is for, is to reduce uncertainty, reduce the risk, reduce the costs. If you go forward with your iteration number, 1,000, without knowing what are your users' needs, you run a much higher risk of having, let's say, a product that is not serving their needs and that is not adopted, and so you might have to roll it back, correct it, and so in the end, it's time that is spent by your developers, by your designers, twice, because you have to go back and redo it, and you have to add research on top of it. So yeah, it's really, really not advised. Do research as early and as frequently as possible. And so we want actionable insights because as user researchers, we want to provide, we are doing the user research, as I was saying, to reduce uncertainty, of course. And so how can we do that the most effectively? Well, once we have our insights, it has to be understood well by our stakeholders so that they will apply them, so that the research is useful. Because in the end, what we learn through the research is to be used. That's why we do it. If not, we wouldn't do it. If we knew everything about our users, they would have no need to do research. So we do it because we want to learn something in order to develop and to propose a product that serves their needs better. Once we know that, it has to be applied in the product. The changes have to reflect what we found in the research. And so that is what is an actionable insight. It's a learning we have about our users that is actually put into practice, that is actually acted upon by our stakeholders. That means, imagine I'm saying the help section in our app is not easily findable because our users struggle to find it in a usability study. There are a lot of slips and a lot of error rates, and the paths show that they expect it to be somewhere else. And when asked in follow-up interview, they mention that they expected it to be nested into another menu because it makes more sense for them. This is an insight actually, and so there would be no reason for the product manager to go on with the next version of the app without applying this insight, because we know that our users need the feature to be implemented so that it reflects better their mental models and their way of working. So we want our insights to be heard and to be acted upon because actually it will benefit everyone, not only because it's not an ego fight. It's not this. It's because it will help the product, it will help the company, it will help the users, it will help everyone. So for all product managers out there, or product designers, developers, and so on, stakeholders, when we push for our insights to be acted upon, it's not because we want to be a pain. It's really because it will benefit everyone. And so, yeah, we really want that. And so how do you realize that, how do you realize that having actionable insights are important? It's actually when, maybe not everyone, but in my case at least, it's what happened. It's when you run into a wall, basically, when you do research and when you expect, you live like in a fairy tale. You expect that, okay, you do your work, you do your research, you deliver your work, and you expect the next person to take your work and to act on it, basically. When I went straight out of school and into my first jobs, which were at my first two jobs were at two major automotive companies. Let me tell you, I hit a wall, because when you work in research in automotive, first of all, you have to know that when you work in like the 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 most advanced research, let's say, so research and development, what you are striving to find as insights may or may not be applied into the next product, but you may see a tiny 1% of what you found between 5 or 8 years after your study. So that is something that if you really want to see your insights applied, if you really are attached to your work and to your insights and the value you want to provide, that is something that can be depressing the first time. But then you have also to put this into perspective, and that is my other point that I wanted to tell, because I lived one of the most extreme, let's say, situations, because 5 to 8 years is enormous. For instance, when you work in e-commerce, it will be way less. Or when you work in a startup, for instance, you can see directly the impact of your work. But in my case, it was this. And then that's also where I learned that not everything is on your shoulders. Basically, you do your job, of course, you deliver insights, of course, but then you're also in a much bigger system and ecosystem that you're working also with other teams, and each team works also with other teams. So you have also to know that there are limitations, and there are also a lot of politics oftentimes in companies, which is, let's be honest, this is the truth. This is the truth, because this is business. This is normal. Like, we want to provide value for the user, but we should not forget as user experience researchers that we should also provide value for the business. So it should be an in between. Of course, it should be a perfect combination, let's say. So I want to like have a kind of disclaimer saying that what I'm about to say now, even if you apply all these tips, you may not have your insights acted upon. And in the end, I want to say focus on the things you can control. This is something that I strive to apply even more and more every time in my work, because I realize that you can act the best as you want. Sometimes the insights are not applied, and rightfully, when you speak with the stakeholders, there are really, really valid reasons. So not everything is on your shoulders. Okay, now let's go to the tips. We'll go over 5 tips. The first one is, of course, phrasing the insights correctly. Of course, if you learn something, but you communicate it the wrong way, it will not be understood. Even if the insight is amazing, if you do not communicate it rightfully, it will not be understood. So again, if you haven't listened to my previous episode on how to phrase user research insights, I will do a quick recap here. So an insight should be clear, concise, using accessible vocabulary, accessible language. Do not strive to be flowery. It doesn't serve any purpose, really. Imagine you're telling that to someone who's not in the field. Okay? So to your kids, to your grandparents, whatever. So yeah, try to be as clear and concise as possible, and then follow, of course, the anatomy of an insight. And this is something that is super difficult, because if you follow the anatomy of an insight, sometimes the insight gets long, and you want also to be clear and concise. So you need to rewrite. It's a craft, and in the end, it's almost an art. It comes with practice. So you want to strive to say the most with the least amount of words. So sometimes you have to rephrase it, use synonyms, use some words that convey more meaning. So, for instance, if you say, I don't know, the more, how can I say? If you say users' confidence to use the app is influenced by the copy of A, B, or C section, whatever. Okay, this is good, but it lacks something, some elements. So is influenced by, okay, but what is the nature of the influence? Does the confidence increase or decrease due to the copy or whatever? Like, for instance, you could substitute one word by another, and the other would be more communicating more explicitly the nature of the influence, and so you would use the same amount of word but be more straight to the point. That's an example. And then, so the insight is anything about a behavior, emotion, pain point, and so on. But then you have to explain why. Why is this happening, basically? Because if you run qualitative study, you should be able to get to the root of the problem, to the root of the pain point. And so that is where you can say, yeah, okay, their confidence increases with this copy because it reminds them of something they trust in. Whatever, I'm saying random things, but this is the idea. And what I strive to say every time to my mentees and to juniors, really, try to see that as a dish that you're trying to make. And if you go, I don't know, in a restaurant and you eat in the dark and you know it's something is really, really good, but you don't see what you're eating, you will not be able to reproduce it because you don't know what's in there. So you will be able to say, yeah, it's good, or it's bad, or I don't like it. Okay, why? Well, you will be able to say about some taste and so on, but if you do not know what are the ingredients of what is happening with your customer, you will not be able to reproduce it, or you will not be able to say to your stakeholder, this element, next iteration, keep it because this makes the user feel this way. Or this element, take it away and substitute this by this one because users feel this way because of that. That's the idea. The source of the pain point or behavior. So this is for really a big summary. Then I encourage you to go to the dedicated episode. Next tip, the recommendation. The recommendation is really the junction between your insights and your and the fact that it will be acted upon or not. Because you have insights, okay, this is independent of any recommendation. This is what is happening. This is what the users are saying. But now, what do we recommend? And don't shy away, UX researchers. You are in a power of recommending. You are an expert at UX. So you should recommend, first of all. Then, the recommendation, what should it be? Be careful. It should not be something that is solution-oriented, like make the button blue. We don't want that. And it should not be too broad, like provide freedom to users. Okay, what is that? It could be an in-between, which is allow users to customize this information. Okay, so this is providing more freedom. And then maybe this includes putting some button in blue. I don't know, saying random things. But you have to hit a sweet spot between being broad and being solution-oriented. So you see when you're being solution-oriented, when you're giving UI recommendations, when you're saying things about the UI. And to not be too broad, you have basically you have to focus on the consequence on the user experience you want to achieve. So if, for instance, there is a pain point because there is a lot of friction when opening an app, you can say, allow users to find more easily this aspect because there is less friction doing so. So you want to target directly the consequence on the user experience. And so, target the consequence without going too far into the UI. And then mention what will be the impact. So, for instance, if you say, consider allowing users to edit this feature or this aspect in their profile, this will improve their, sense of freedom. This is the consequence. You can place some UX metrics. So, for instance, this will decrease the error rate. So mention really the consequence on the user experience and the impact this will have for the UX and maybe for the business. Be careful with that, but you can try. And so the stakeholders, when seeing that, they will be much more interested in your recommendation. And then, of course, think about prioritizing, because giving a list of recommendations, let's say, 10 recommendations, yeah, okay, it's easy, but what should you do first? Stakeholders want as much as possible. They have so many things to think about. A product manager has to think about a lot of things. Analytics, business, UX, the copy, the features, the roadmap, whatever. So as long as you can make their thinking as easy as possible, the better. So prioritize your recommendation and give them some severity levels. This recommendation maybe is a high severity. It should be addressed first in terms of user experience, because either if not applied, it blocks the user experience. The user is not able to complete the task, so this leads to lost users. So this would be a high severity, or it can be medium if it happens consistently, and so it highly affects, let's say, the user experience and the satisfaction, and it can lead to lost users in the end. This would be a medium recommendation level, or a low recommendation level. In this case, it could be a nice to have. It can be a nice adding, but maybe it's like third priority. And so, yeah, accompany as much as possible your recommendations by their severity level, so that then the product manager can rank them. Okay, then you have to try to. So we went over two tips. The first one is phrasing the insights correctly, then the recommendations. The third one is try to place them in a larger context, your insights and recommendations. So in general, in UX, we deliver reports with a list of insights and a list of recommendations. This is the most common format. I'm not saying others don't exist. Of course, there are a lot of others, and I'm coming at this next. But the most common delivery is like a list of insights and a list of recommendations, because it's the most efficient for us. But again, try to represent the information in a way that is digestible for your stakeholders and in a way that they will remember the information, because a list is way more difficult to remember than, say, for instance, and this is the third point, a UX deliverable. A UX deliverable can be anything. It can be a persona. It can be a customer journey. It can be an empathy map. It can be anything. And so if you synthesize all your learnings into one common place that in general can fit into one slide, you have all the insights and the recommendations into the same place. And for instance, a customer journey is a good format, because oftentimes for a product, it is experienced through steps. Imagine I want to connect, I want to log into my app, I want to see my earnings, I want to see my expenses, then I want to make, a transfer to my bank account, whatever. You have several examples here. So you go through steps, okay? And so in each one of those steps, you have a user performing an action. So you can have, you can mention the steps, then the actions taken, the goal behind the action, the need, the pain point, and the opportunity. And when everything is nicely sorted into a customer journey, first of all, for instance, it will communicate it through a story. And so it will resonate way more to your stakeholder. Your stakeholder will be able to empathize way more, first of all. And a stakeholder who empathizes is a stakeholder who can put him or herself into the shoes of the customer. And so as they will relate more, they will have a bad time if they do not implement what you're recommending. So that's why it's super important. First of all, also the customer journey in general, or any other UX deliverable, I'm focusing on customer journey, but the others also work, are an in-between, are really a bridge between your insights and in general the business objectives. Because in the business, let's say when they talk about the features that they're going to implement and so on, They have roadmaps, okay, and because they have a way of organizing their features, of course. So they think systems, they think blueprints, okay. So this is their way of thinking, and so if you can produce a deliverable that aligns to their way of thinking, it's also way easier for them to consume. Whereas if it's an insight that is isolated, maybe not. I'm not saying it won't work, but maybe less. That's my point. In fact, for me, it helped more. Okay, and the fourth tip is actually to accompany as much as possible. How can I say? Try to take your insights and your recommendations with you as much as possible and as far as possible in the process. So, for instance, one thing that worked super well in the past, when I delivered insight into my previous companies, was I did not only deliver a presentation with insights and recommendations, but actually I was in charge of running ideation workshops, when in general, again, it depends, but in general, it's much more UX designers who are the origin of it, okay? But why not? Why couldn't you? So you could go to a workshop. I really love what we call design studios workshop, which are design studio workshops, which are a kind of workshop in which you are provided with some knowledge beforehand. So in our case, it will be the insights and the recommendations, and then everyone ideates on top of that. But it's really, really structured. So it has 5 or 4 steps, and we go through each of them, and we try to, at the end, reach a point in which everyone at the table, every stakeholders, and that's why it's super important to invite everyone at the table, like from various disciplines, let's say a data analyst, a UX researcher, a designer, a developer, why not, and product manager, because and engineers and so on. Maybe also some business analysts. It makes sense. The caveat with this is the more you are, the more difficult it will be to have sometimes some discussions, because everyone will see through their perspective only. It's possible this happens, so be careful. But the more perspectives at the table, also the richer the conversation. It can go both ways. So I would say try. It depends maybe on the company, depends on the culture. Try it and see how it goes. For me, it worked really amazingly. So we go through several steps in the design studio. First, you present the knowledge, and then you try to ideate on that. So it can be crazy eight, it can be how might we's. Of course, introduce your problem statement, introduce the fact that, okay, now we're gonna ideate. Then I liked very much an activity which is called the 6 hats thinking technique, which is everyone in the group is assigned a hat, and the hat has a color. Every hat has a color, blue, yellow, red, and each color corresponds to a role. So, for instance, you can have, I don't know, I'm saying randomly, I'm not sure exactly about the colors, but for instance, the red hat, the feelings, you have the green hat, the creativity, blue hat, the thinking process, and so on. But then you have adaptations. So, for instance, we will have the ideas laid out, and then we will have someone, it will be more optimistic about the ideas. So it will say the pros, and then someone has another hat, which is the pessimist's point of view, and then someone has the technical feasibility in mind, for instance. So you can do it by role inside the company. So for instance, the engineer can have the technical feasibility, of course, and you can have the user advocate. You can adapt this technique as much as you want. This is not set in stone. But the idea is that, so we critique the idea to iterate on that. Once we do that, and that we iterated on that, we try to converge. So every idea that was iterated, then we try to mix them with other ideas. We try to change part of the ideas. So we try to iterate on the idea, but all together. so that we arrive at common ideas. Basically, it's a convergence, whereas the first step, which was ideating, is a divergence. And then in the end is the ultimate convergence, which is we prioritize. So here you have the common 2x2 matrix about the user experience and the impact on the user experience and the feasibility. You can prioritize by voting, but it's a good way. And I will end with this about this tip. It's a good way to make sure that first of all your insights and your recommendations were well understood by everyone, and then since everyone is at the table, considering technical feasibility, considering budget, I don't know, whatever, you will have more chance every time an idea is changed to be there and to see, guys, be careful. You're not answering the problem at hand here. We're generating a new idea, okay, but is this answering the user problem? I'm here to remind you guys that we have this user problem at hand. So this is super important because now I'm thinking, it's true, I never mentioned since the beginning of the episode why an insight could not be acted upon. It could be many things. It could be technical feasibility. It could be budget. It could be because it's not understood well by your stakeholders, and so they completely transformed the recommendation into something else. It could be because everyone is biased, or some people are biased, and so they are solution oriented, and so they fell in love with their solution. Let's be frank, this happens a lot, even to us user researchers sometimes. So many things can happen, but this kind of workshop is here to make sure, well, you are there at the table in this kind of workshop to make sure, okay, we will ideate to make sure in the end, for instance, technical feasibility is considered, so we will have no excuse to say, we couldn't do it, because we will iterate on the recommendation to meet the user insight, but also considering technical feasibility. That's really the point. And so in the end, your insight will get acted upon. And finally, this is the last tip. It's about follow-up. Follow up as much as possible. So it's not about I deliver you a report, insight, recommendation, and then sayonara, and I don't see you for the next couple months. No. Follow up. Talk to your stakeholders. Ask them, what is the status of the implementation? Is it design? Is it A/B test? Is it development? What is it? Okay, you're in A/B test. Okay, what did you do? Can I see? Why is this not implemented? And sometimes they will have super valid arguments. Like, in the end, sometimes I just want to say life happens. It's not on you. There are things you can improve, but you can only do so much. Sometimes it's only how it is. And sometimes also, I want to say for all product managers and designers and so on listening, I know it's also not on you because sometimes you want to apply the insights, you want to apply the recommendation, but you also cannot. So sometimes it's bigger than us, and we all know that. But by following up, it's also a way to make sure, okay, guys, be careful. Next step, you're implementing this. I don't know, send me a message or whatever. Tell me what you're up to, and then we can see if you're on the right track or not. That's the point. Because imagine once the feature is into production, or maybe once it's rolled out, well, it's too late. If the insight was not implemented correctly, it's too late if there is an issue. So yeah, I would say, to sum up, phrase the insight correctly, think about your recommendations, place your insights in a larger context, consider, for instance, user journeys, personas, any UX deliverable, accompany your insights as much as possible, for instance, using workshops, and finally, follow up as much as possible, keep track of it to make sure they are on the right track. And that's it for today. I was super happy to do this episode. I think I will do more about this format. Let's say some tips, but like organized in a nice way around the topic. And I hope I really that the content is helpful, please, 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 if it's helpful, subscribe to the show so that you can be notified, because the episodes are not every week. I try to do them, but it's honestly difficult, so that you can be notified when there is a new one. And please rate the show as well, if you like it, and if you at least learned one thing. If you, when you listen, you thought that's an insight. So that would be a way for me to know that my insights are actionable. Again, thanks a lot for listening, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.